Alright, so you want to learn manual. The first thing we need to do, specifically if you are just starting out brand new and you've never driven a manual before, is find a location that's quiet and easy for you to get the basics down pat. Now the basics are going to be clutch release, accelerator at the same time, and brake release. So you don't want to start on a surface that has any kind of gradient, whether it be up or down or side to side. So you want to keep it fairly flat. What we're going to do first up is just practice releasing the clutch and giving it a little bit of accelerator at the same time, and then depressing the clutch back in. So just physically getting the vehicle moving, then stopping the vehicle. Moving, stopping the vehicle, and cycling through that to get that efficiency right to start with. Okay, so it doesn't have to be straight out onto a main road and see if we can get the vehicle moving and deal with the worst kind of traffic. That's probably the worst way to start off a brand new driver trying to learn how to drive a manual for the first time. So it's really important that we get the use of the gear shifter in the right way, and your hand position on the gear shifter is going to make it easier when you start to actually change gears. So for changing gears, we obviously have to put the clutch in to allow the engine to disengage from the transmission and at the same time change to the gear that we want. Now, how do we know what gear we want? Well, what we need to do is understand some basics about how a manual car works. So your engine, if it has too much of a higher gear, won't be able to push your vehicle along. So what we need to do is select the right gear for the right moment. That means you have to start off in the low gears, first gear, then into second gear, up into third gear, and then fourth and fifth or sixth or seventh, depending on what you've got. So starting off in the low gear, you want to get that vehicle moving so it doesn't bunny hop and shudder down the road and things like that. And to do that, you're going to have to slip the clutch a little bit. And that's just where you feel the bite of the clutch start to take up. As that happens, you want to obviously just put on a little bit of throttle so you can at that same time not stall the engine, because that's probably one of the biggest fears people have driving a manual, is stalling it. Okay, so now we've got the basics right. We've got the vehicle moving and we understand how to activate the clutch and the accelerator and get these two moving in unison to get the vehicle off from a dead stop. Okay, so you understand that. So now we have to go through the gear change. So when you hear the engine revs get too high, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to hear it with this setup we've got now, you hear my engine is way too high, and you can hear that I need to change gears because my engine doesn't want to rev that high. So what I have to do is put the clutch in, let my foot off the accelerator at the same time, change into the next gear, and you hear straight away the engine revs drop down. So that's just a basic way of how a manual gearbox works. Now the next gear, we're also going to have the same thing happen. The engine revs are going to keep coming up and keep coming up, and it's going to sound really noisy. So what we have to do is again change to another gear, and so on and so forth. Now, what happens if I'm in too high a gear and my revs drop down too far? We get what's called shuddering. So I'll show you what happens if we go in too high a gear. So I'm at 20 kilometers an hour and I'm in fourth gear. You can hear the engine. I've got no accelerator. I'm putting the accelerator down and the vehicle's just not moving. And the reason for that is the gear's too high. Fourth gear, 20 kilometers an hour in a standard sort of road car is not going to be good enough. Eventually it will overcome it, but it's not good. It's not good to have no acceleration, and it's just simply not good for the car. Okay, so what we want to do is select the right gear for the circumstance, and the way that we can do that is by either looking at the tachometer, which is on your dashboard, most manual cars will have them, or listening. So one other tip I can give you is when you're learning to drive a manual is keep the radio off. Right, keep the radio off, keep the sound down so you can actually hear the engine. It's very important that you are able to hear the engine when you're learning how to drive a manual, so you get to understand if your engine is laboring, like we just showed you, or if it's revving too high, like we also showed you. So you want to get somewhere in the middle. Obviously, the higher you're revving it, the more fuel you're going to use. Same thing happens when you're laboring it too. If you're laboring it too much, you're going to use too much fuel, and also you're not going to be very safe. So that's kind of the basic way of using the gears and driving a manual. But really what you have to do is just get the practice of letting that clutch out, using the accelerator at the same time, and practicing going forward from there. Now, one last thing, that the biggest fear everyone has when driving a manual is doing a hill start. So when you do a hill start, what you want to do is you want to stop, pull the handbrake on, let your foot off the brake so the handbrake holds the vehicle, or the park brake, or whatever you want to call it. And then as we accelerate and let the clutch out and put our accelerator down, we also release the park brake at the same time. So I'll show you, releasing it at the same time as we're letting the clutch out, and we move off slowly. Again, find somewhere, quiet location, that you can practice hill starts relentlessly over and over again until you get good at it. Now, one thing I will say with hill starts is that it's probably the biggest place where people panic, and then they let the clutch out too fast, they stall it, or they're worried about the vehicles behind getting too close. So one thing that you should be doing every time you're learning to drive in a manual is don't rush it. Take your time, get these competencies up, and slowly over time what will happen is you'll get better and better at it. And the most important thing is don't give up, because driving a manual is very rewarding, and at the same time you get a lot out of it. So you may as well do it the right way, learn the right way, and get a lot of fun out of it. So one thing I want to actually mention to you now is don't rest your foot on the clutch itself. Take it off, put it over to the side where your footrest is on the left. Because if you rest your foot on top of the clutch and you get in a habit of doing that, what it's going to do is that's actually going to wear out the release bearing and also the pressure plate. And the pressure plate is very important, so is the release bearing. And you don't want to do that because it's very costly to replace. The other thing is that you might actually start and slip the clutch without you knowing it, and that can also be expensive to replace too. So try not to rest your foot on the clutch, and it'll be a lot more efficient for you. Now, in this video, I'm not going to show you how to do a heel and toe or anything like that. That'll probably be a later video, but we've given you the basics of how to learn to drive a manual the easy way, or how to teach someone to drive a manual the easy way. One last thing, if you are teaching someone, don't lose your patience with them, don't get upset with them. Try and give them as much encouragement as possible, because they are still learning. The last thing you need is extra pressure on you while you're trying to learn how to drive a manual for the first time. We don't need that. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and also give us a like. Thanks.